Здравствуйте, в эфире новости телекомпании Останкино.
Good evening. In this broadcast, the news from the television company Ostankiно. Counted hours remain before the deadline set by the President of Russia for the relinquishing of weapons by unlawful armed forces on the territory of Chechnya. This deadline expires the 15th of December. In a special statement distributed today, the Russian government warns that the time for persuasion is expiring rapidly and emphasizes that all measures at the disposal of the country will be used in order to ensure the territorial wholeness of Russia. Judging from the developments of the situation in Chechnya, tomorrow will probably not be a point of accounting in the peaceful regularization of the conflict there. The weapons, which according to the request of President Yeltsin must be relinquished by warring sides in exchange for amnesty, continue to shoot. Blood continues to be spilled. Not somewhere far off on a strange land, Russians are killing each other who have been divided into two opposing camps by the dramatic situation. It's characteristic that in the situation with Chechnya, federal rule has involved all three forms used in the world to resolve conflict, the dialogue process considering mutual interests, complying with norms of law, and using the force option. Just yesterday, hope for regularization was connected with the Vladikavkaz dialogues, which had begun. However, today, the president of Chechnya, Jahar Dudayev, speaking on local television, admonished his supporters to defend themselves, stating that we won't play the peacekeepers any longer. This signifies, first of all, the fact that the inter-Chechen conflict can acquire a protracted nature. And what regards the combat situation, both sides assess it differently. According to the Temporary Information Center of the Russian government, units of the Ministry of Defense and Internal Affairs of Russia are approaching the Chechen capital in order to basically complete its blockade today. According to Grozny, the resistance is acquiring a position-type character, and yet, no matter what the leaning of these frontline reports is, they can't in full reflect the entire horror of the tragedy caused by the conflict. According to the headquarters of Jahar Dudayev today, throughout the entire afternoon, air forces of Russia launched missile and bomb raids on villages and cities of Chechnya. The military sources, however, refuted this information to a correspondent of Vitor Tass, stating that the aviation and helicopters were conducting an operation to provide cover from the air for convoys and divisions of Russian forces who have entered Chechnya, and also dealt blows to Jahar Dudayev's sources of firing on the territory of Chechnya. The dialogues in Vladikavkaz still formally feed hope that the political path to resolving the Chechnya conflict is still possible. At least, the talks have not yet stopped, although the delegation of Grozny today, after midday, took a time out in order to consult with its leadership. Moreover, both the Russian and Chechen delegations made an official statement of their intention to continue those dialogues. The material on the progress of those talks is being prepared for our broadcast currently, and we'll show it in a few minutes. The Vice Premier of Russia, Nikolai Yegorov, explaining the reasons for the departure of Dudayev's delegation from dialogues in Vladikavkaz, said that its intentions remain the same, that Russia should conduct talks with Chechnya as with an independent country, but Russia will never accept this, the Vice Premier emphasized. According to him, today Chechnya is a criminal territorial state formation. The Vice Premier stated also that after the units of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Defense liquidate the unlawful armed groups in Chechnya, he will remain in Grozny as a representative of the president in the Chechnya Republic. The elders actively supported the actions of the Russian military on disarming gang formations and requested that the launched operation be brought to an end. I'm an oil worker. I've worked for 25 years, a veteran of labor. Since May, our boreholes have been sealed off near Tolstoy Yurt, which gave the Republic 75% of its oil. And all of 1994, I have not received salary, nor do I receive subsidies, compensations, or pensions. I ask you again, you who have begun these actions, and with our aid, I implore you not to stop, even for a minute, and make not a single step backwards. These gang formations, if tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, you will find agreement with Dudayev and find some sort of a compromise. This will be no agreement or compromise. He will pull you and us into a trap and a hole. On his part, Nikolai Yegorov informed those who gathered of measures undertaken by the government to normalize the life in Chechnya. Among these measures, there is the provision for delivery into the Republic of humanitarian aid. 60 tons already have been delivered by emergency ministry planes to Mozdok and restore the railroads and resolve the most severe social issues, such as payment of pension and salary, which people here have not received for years. We don't make divisions between Russians and Chechens. We are all a sole Russian people. As of today, the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the zone of Chechnya, after disarming some militarized gangs and the surrender of some heavy weapons, on the orders of the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Russian Federation, has several missions. First of all, that is the restoration of the system of law enforcement organs along the line of the ministry on the territory of Chechnya, to restore normal militia forces in order to defend lawful interests of the citizens living in Chechnya. That means to restore regional departments and restore line and territorial organs of militia, and that means to aid them in equipment, financing, technical supply, etc. Evidently, this plan is the same for the Prosecutor General and the Supreme Court, etc. Evidently, that direction being pursued, that is, as a result of free elections, as a result of establishing law on the territory of Chechnya, electing heads of administrations or appointing them, will make it possible to establish on the territory of Chechnya a legal field. And now a report of our correspondent from Vladikavkaz on under what conditions were the talks suspended between the Chechen and Russian delegations. Today in Vladikavkaz, the talks on regularizing the situation in Chechnya and Chikaria, the situation escalated to an extreme. The Chechen delegation asked that a working break be announced because the situation in Chechnya has changed. Both sides issued a statement for the press, the importance of which is that Russia and Chechnya categorically assert their adherence to resolving all questions connected with regularizing the Chechnya conflict exclusively in a peaceful manner. And so talks should continue, but their future progress will depend on what is announced tonight by the Chechnya delegation from Grozny after consulting with Jahar Dudayev. The position of the Russian delegation is commented on by the deputy head of the Task Commission of the Government of Russia, Alexander Asmolov. I want to say that a temporary break has occurred. This break occurred on the suggestion of the Chechen delegation. The Chechen delegation has gone back to Grozny for consultations in order to discuss those points which currently are stumbling blocks. I think that today we will receive information from Grozny about when, perhaps even today, these dialogues will resume. Since yesterday, the Chechen side made several more proposals, and these suggestions are considered, but truly the basic discussion is around the question of what is of priority in this dramatic situation. Is the priority the withdrawal of troops from the territory of the Republic, or should simultaneous withdrawal and disarmament begin, and withdrawal of troops on the basis of the Constitution of Russia? That's the position of the Russian Commission. I want also to say that the dialogues continue, and that is important. The Temporary Information Center under the government of Russia stated today that the interdepartmental group under the authorized representative of the Russian president in Chechnya, Nikolai Yegorov, began to develop a plan of measures in order to restore the economy of Chechnya. This group includes representatives of 17 ministries and departments of Russia. And the Ministry of Healthcare was instructed to provide medical aid to the sick and injured refugees from border areas of Chechnya. 16 treatment facilities in bordering regions and the Stavropol Rim area will take in the sick and injured, and they will be treated by 135 physician brigades. brigades. Accommodations in Moscow hospitals are being examined. The situation in Chechnya remains the main topic for the top officials and heads of 4 structures of Russia. Today, our correspondent was given an interview by the acting prosecutor general of Russia, Alexei Yudushenko. To what degree is the deployment of forces in Chechnya in compliance with Russian laws? From the point of view of the law, as of today, in compliance with the Constitution, the Chechnya Republic is the subject of the Russian Federation, that is, the territory of the country of Russia, and this, overall, is that legal basis which gave the right to the President to give the order to Russian troops to restore order. No one wants blood, and unconditionally to achieve the desired goal through dialogue. Will it happen that the participation of the military in this operation will later be held against them? All our military troops, they are soldiers, officers, and generals who today, in accordance with the decree of the President, are fulfilling their mission on ensuring lawfulness and the application of the Russian Constitution in the Chechen Republic unconditionally are under the protection of that Constitution, under the protection of those laws, and not any one of them will be criminally or otherwise held responsible. The President of Ingushetia reported facts where, during this operation, peaceful residents suffered. Do you know about that? Yes. On Monday, I had a telephone conversation with the President of Ingushetia. I instructed the Caucasus Interregional Prosecutor to study the materials which the prosecutor of Ingushetia has today, and also send a group of military prosecutors there in order to receive information firsthand. The Speaker of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin, today instructed his deputy, Valentin Kovalov, to daily, prior to the plenary meetings of the chamber, to inform deputies about the number of casualties in the zone of the Chechen conflict, as among the Russian military servicemen, as well as among the Chechens. The problem of Chechnya again was heard in the Duma while discussing the agenda. Proposals were expressed on the meeting of the delegation of the Duma with the President to expound on the positions and demands for the resignation of the Vice Premier Nikolai Yegorov, who's handling the two-sided relations, but these were not supported. Criticism was heard against the press and television, which, in the opinion of several deputies, by distorting information, are heating up the situation. The deputies instructed the leadership of the Duma to attempt to resume the parliamentary hour program on television. Today in the Duma, journalists met with the mullahs of Chechnya and the chairman of the Union of Elders of the Republic. They arrived in Moscow in order to meet with the top officials of Russia to express their concern for the escalating conflict in Chechnya and exhort Moscow and Grozny toward peaceful resolution of the conflict. The position of the faction Russia's choice was emphasized by Yegor Gaidar. The deputies of the faction Russia's choice express various points of view on Chechnya. What is your position? We are a democratic party, a democratic faction. Therefore, we do have internal discussion. But the position of the party, Russia's choice, was defined long ago by the political council with an overwhelming majority vote. And they're extremely simple. First of all, we are for the peaceful regularization of the Chechen problem. Secondly, we are absolutely convinced that the possibilities of the dialogue process have not been exhausted. And third, we are against using the crisis in Chechnya in order to destabilize the situation in the country, or requests to impeach the president or early elections in order to ignite tension, which already is enormous in society. In connection with events in Chechnya, in Kuban, within the Rim administration, an operational headquarters was set up. It's instructed to apply measures to strengthen law and order in villages and Cossack towns. Protection of objects of significance has been heightened. The Chechen question was also discussed at the first session of the Legislative Assembly of the Krasnodar Rim. The agenda of the first session in many ways was traditional, the problem of regulations and electing a chairman, but the new deputies were of course concerned with questions concerning Chechnya, which, although it does not border immediately with Kuban, yet is quite nearby. Through the Krasnodar Rim area, forces of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs passed through to localize the volatile situation in Chechnya. On the eve of today's session, a convoy passed through with food and construction materials as well. And furthermore, the question of the Cossack involvement in the Chechnya conflict. The Kuban Cossacks and several of their representatives also have become deputies of the Legislative Assembly, will not participate in that conflict. The directors of the Union of Cossacks distributed a statement today in which it expresses bewilderment regarding reports in some sources of mass media about separate dialogues between Dudaev and certain representatives of the Cossacks. The director of the Union of Cossacks states that the Cossacks of Russia support the position of the government and president of Russia in the sense of restoring lawfulness and order in the Northern Caucasus region, specifically in Chechnya. Events underway currently in Chechnya affect the interests of the Rostov district as well. Viktor Nikolaevich, how does the district administration relate to the events occurring currently in Chechnya? We all, the administration, and I think all the people today, with anxiety, are watching events occurring in the Chechnya Republic, which is part of our Russian state. And of course, it's alarming what is occurring there today, but the opinion is unanimous among the majority of people with whom I've met, and this is not only workers within the administration. Yesterday, in the Legislative Assembly, we invited all those deputies who gathered. There were at least 20 people there. Basically, on certain questions, we did have differences, but the basic and foremost is that the wholeness of Russia must be preserved. This is paramount, and that is what unites us all, despite our political memberships, movements, principles, education, etc. The country must be strong and whole, and we must not permit the collapse of Russia today. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, issued a warning today against interference in Russia's internal affairs because of events in Chechnya. The Foreign Affairs head stated, "I would not advise anyone to interfere in Russia's internal affairs. There will be no laurels, but can create serious problems for those countries. The national political problems which gripped Russia cannot be resolved in oblivion of a simple truth that each of its citizens has the right to life, freedom, and happiness. This is a fundamental law of the life of society advocated by Andrei Dmitrievich Sakharov. Today is the day of his bright memory." In great wisdom, there is much sadness, Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament says. Andrei Dmitrievich Sakharov, a man of a great tragic fate, one of the greatest physicists of the century, the creator of the hydrogen bomb. Leaving the career of a scientist without ever leaving his science, physics, turning down many special privileges which the Soviet government showered on people of such stature, Sakharov became of great stature in another measure. His new occupation was the battle for human rights, for a new society in which all people, as Sakharov wrote in his draft constitution, has the right to life, liberty, and happiness. In his last telephone conversation on Thursday, the 14th of December at 8 p.m., Andrei Dmitrievich said that he will still work on the text of his constitution, and 1 hour later, he was no longer. The Constitution of the Commonwealth of United Eurasian States became a unique political will of Sakharov. Here is one of its paragraphs. The global aim of the survival of humanity has a priority over any regional, state, or national objectives. Is this thought not actual today, when in many parts of the planet human blood flows? The majority of Sakharov's suggestions become and are becoming a reality today, and we understand that he was no saint, nor a fool, nor a big helpless child, as he was described in the press during the first days after his death. He was wise, sober, and brave, determined in his cause. He sought a way out, but many misunderstood his quest. 1953, the first test of the hydrogen bomb, Sakharov's memoirs. We drove by destroyed test buildings. Suddenly the vehicle stopped near an eagle with burned wings. He was trying to ascend and fly, but he couldn't. One of the officers got out of the car and with a strong kick killed him, stopping the suffering of the unfortunate bird. With each test, thousands of birds die. They fly up during the explosion, but later they fall, burned and blinded. And wasn't all of Sakharov's life a blinding by his own conscience and the torturous pain for humanity, which doesn't realize in which direction it's flying? A wreath on behalf of the President of Russia was laid on the tomb of the academic Andrei Sakharov by the Deputy Head of the President's Administration, Sergei Krasavchenko, and the Press Secretary of the Head of State, Vyacheslav Gostikov. Also in the ceremony was the Chairman of the Commission under the President on the Rehabilitation of Victims of Political Repression, Alexander Yakovlev. Today, the Vice President of the United States, Albert Gore, arrived in Moscow for a 3-day visit. In the Russian capital, he will hold several important meetings, the aim of which is all-encompassing development of cooperation between Russia and the United States. Albert Gore is the first high-placed official within the American administration who arrived in Moscow after the President of Russia in Budapest at the forum of the CSCE expressed the negative attitude of our country to imminent plans of broadening NATO, which in the world was viewed as evidence of the worsening in Russian-American relations. In Vnukovo II airport, the American Vice President was met by the chairman of the Russian government, Viktor Chernomyrdin. After his arrival, Gore attended the State Duma, where he met with the Speaker, Ivan Rybkin. The Vice President is the second official after the President of the United States. According to the American Constitution, the Vice President chairs the Senate but does not vote. He only decides the result of voting in the event where senators' votes split evenly. The 46-year-old Albert Gore is a very popular and authoritative politician. He's the son of Albert Gore Sr., who for 14 years represented the state of Tennessee in the House of Representatives and later for 3 terms was a senator. Albert Gore Jr. was born in the capital of the United States, although his real home is the American South, the state of Tennessee. Gore has a political science degree from the Harvard University. His diploma thesis was called The Influence of Television Over the Activities of the American Presidents from the years 1947 to 1969. Despite the fact that Gore, like his father, condemned the Vietnam War, he, because of his principles, did not avoid military service and spent 2 years near Saigon as a military correspondent. His reports were published in the Tennessean newspaper, where after returning from Vietnam, he worked for another 5 years. For 8 years, Gore was a congressman, and from 1984 until 1992, a senator from the state of Tennessee. The Vice President has a large family by American standards, a wife, 3 daughters, and a son. His hobbies are frequent visits to his home state and sports, including jogging. The basic focus of the visit is participating in the meeting of the Russian-American Commission on Cooperation, which is usually called the Gore-Chernomyrdin Commission. Prior to meeting with Rybkin, Gore admitted that the flight was difficult, but when he landed on Russian soil and saw the snow, he became invigorated immediately and believed that everything would be fine. In Kiev today, talks continued between the delegations of Russia and Ukraine on the Black Sea Fleet issue. The Declaration on Common Principles of Division, 9 draft proposals on how to concretely divide the fleet, were examined by the sides during the 2 days. The most contentious issue was, again, the question of where to base the fleet. Russia's previously wants Kerch, Feodosia, and Sevastopol. Ukraine insists on both fleets being based on a brotherly basis in various bays along the Sevastopol shore, justifying this by the fact that providing Russia with the entire city and the coastal infrastructure with the full removal of Ukrainian military seamen from there will precipitate not only social problems. The years of the dialogue marathon does not facilitate maintaining combat readiness of the Black Sea Fleet. The ships are aging, and each side wants to repair its own ships only. Judging from the results of the talks, progress was achieved to a degree. The basic principles of the declaration were agreed on, and the process of sides coming closer continues on the questions of dividing, basing, and compensation. The division of the Black Sea Fleet is just as painful a problem which arose as after the collapse of the USSR, just as the division of a once common space basis. The fleet and space sector today are functioning in extremely unsatisfactory conditions, but still are functioning. Today, from the northern space pad in Plisetsky, another satellite was launched into orbit from the series Lightning. It's intended to provide all forms of communication for the pre-polar regions of Russia. Unfortunately, the signal from the satellite networks drifting over the equator does not reach our extreme north. The launch was prepared and conducted by combat calculations of the military space forces, which as just as the entire Russian army are on a ration ticket today, and yet they launch into orbit communications, navigational and meteorological satellites strictly on schedule. Otherwise, in Russia, and not only in Russia, chaos will ensue. The rocket took off the launching pad in the snowy taiga exactly at the time calculated by the ballistic specialists. At around 1800 hours, it could be seen as a shining dot floating along the northern part of the horizon, even from Moscow. In trading today at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange, the rate of the dollar rose by 30 points and is at 3,368 rubles per dollar. The Stolichny Savings Bank. This name from today on will be worn by one of the major capital banks, Stolichny. 70% of all accounts will belong to private individuals and only 30% will be held by organizations. Over the last 2 years, the bank increased its branches and trained qualified personnel to serve individuals. Today, a new branch opened in the Hotel Metropole. It's intended for the affluent people, but not only does the bank see the new Russians as its clients, we can already concretely say that we are a savings bank and that we are a bank for all private depositors. With the aid of a plastic card, STB card, a client of the bank can receive cash in any city of the country with its branch. To open a ruble account and receive a card costs only 500 rubles today, and all Russians have now one more possibility to engage in the culture of financial transactions accepted in the entire world. The armed forces of Abkhazia were placed today on military alert. As the Ministry of Information and Press of the Republic reported, this is because the situation in areas bordering with Abkhazia in Georgia is becoming more tense. Abkhazian sources say that in the Exuzits region of Georgia, the local population is being mobilized. Also, concentration of heavy combat technology was observed not far from the river Inguria. In NATO headquarters, today a two-day conference opened of the Ministers of Defense of the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance. One of the most important topics was the presence of the peacekeeping contingent of the UN in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This question has acquired specific actuality in light of one of the most serious incidents during the entire history of the Bosnian peacekeeping operation. That is, the unprovoked shooting near Bihać on Monday at a UN combat transport vehicle, as a result of which one Bangladeshi peacekeeper died and 4 were seriously injured. The intentional, cold-blooded, premeditated act, as it was called in the UN headquarters in Zagreb last night, was condemned by the UN Security Council. A negative reaction to the occurrence was expressed by NATO Secretary General Willy Klaus. The incident in Bihać again raises the question with all intensity about the possibility of further presence of peacekeepers in Bosnia. And so France, which had sent to the Balkans 5,500 of its soldiers and officers, and that's more than any other country, officially has addressed the UN and NATO with a request to develop a plan for evacuation of blue helmets from Bosnia-Herzegovina. According to experts diagnosing the situation, if this does occur, in Bosnia, total war will break out. And according to predictions, those to suffer most from this, initially at least, will be the Muslims. Because it's no secret for anyone that the presence of the UN peacekeepers has allowed the Ilija Izetbegović government to stay in power. And one more important aspect, dragging Croatia into the conflict threatens that events in former Yugoslavia could go out from under the control of the international community completely, and this, as is clearly evident, will virtually leave no hope for peacefully resolving the Bosnian conflict. Should the Eastern European countries be misled in their hopes regarding their entry into the European Union, because on them the basic burden will fall in the process of coming closer with the European Union? This was stated today by the Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Kohl, speaking in Euro Parliament in Strasbourg. A similar thought was expressed by the Chairman of the European Commission, Jacques Delors. In his opinion, one shouldn't underestimate the distance which divides the economies of the Eastern European countries and the European Union. Spending almost 8 hours in the Milan prosecutor's office, which is investigating a sensational case on the corruption in political and business circles, was the chairman of the Ministerial Council of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi. For the first time in Italian legal practice, the Prime Minister is being investigated. He made depositions regarding the allegations made against him that he was involved in bribing officers of the Financial Guard. The second day is coming to an end of the work of the 7th Conference of the Heads of States and Governments of the country members of the organization, the Islamic Conference, to preserve the role of Islam as a religion of peace and solidarity, and also regularizing problems which face the Islamic world today. These were the basic topics of the meeting. 16 people have died as a result of an airplane crash in the state, North Carolina. A plane of the American Eagle Line didn't reach the airport by approximately 6 kilometers. Because of the impact with ground, the craft was split into several parts. This is already the 4th American Eagle crash in the last 7 years, including the occurrence on the 31st of October of this year when 68 people died. The Spanish police reported that it managed to confiscate a shipment of heroin with an approximate value of $154 million and arrest the leader of the Turkish narcotics mafia operating on the territory of Spain. 118 kilograms of narcotic substances were found during the police raid in the suburban area of Madrid. This is the most successful operation of the Spanish anti-narcotics brigade in the last 30 years. 20 companies from 18 countries of the world participated in the first international competition festival of radio productions, the Ostankino Prize for 1994. And as the actress who played the best woman's role at the microphone, the jury selected the 85-year-old Patricia Hayes from England. She's a universal and unique actress. She performed much in movies and television presentations. 22 years ago, subscribers of the popular newspaper Sun voted Patricia Hayes as the best television actress of the year in England. And here there's a new prize, unexpected, from Russia with Love, for the role of an elderly solitary pensioner who lives in a modest municipal apartment, a half-hour radio broadcast played on BBC, directed by John Adamson. The jury evidently was touched by the story of the old woman who used any chance to exchange at least a few words with other people. Because of her energy and kindness, the circle of cynicism gradually breaks down. The atmosphere in which the Russian ambassador Anatoly Adamyshin awarded the Ostankino Prize 1994 to Patricia Hayes proliferates the theme of the radio program, the theme of human warmth, kindness, humane attention toward each other. The actress warmly thanked the television radio company Ostankino and the Department of Radio Programs of the European Union on Television Radio Broadcasting for organizing the competition and the high appraisal of the mastery of acting. About the accomplishments of sportsmasters you'll learn in a moment after the news. All the best. Good evening. Today, on the second last day of the World Chess Olympics, the victors were learned among the men and among the women. The women Georgian players, with a score of 2.5 by half a point, beat the Russian team, and in the final match, the winners of the previous Olympics need only half a point. Our first men's team is one step away from first place as well. The Russian players today met with the English, and for now the score is 2.5 by half for the Russians. I'll note the victory of Garry Kasparov over Nigel Short. At the second level in the World Cup in the Alpine racing, a second victory at these competitions in the season was held by the Russian Elena Velbin. On the distance 10 kilometers classic style, our teams were unmatched. Velba was in first place, Gavriluk second, and in third, Olga Danilova. The gals' success was supported by the Russian skiers as well. The Olympic champion of 1988, Alexei Prokhorov, won the 15-kilometer distance classic style, beating the famous Norwegian skier Björn Deli and the Swede Nicholas Jonsson. Today in the International Hockey League there were two matches in the Western Zone. Torpedoes from Yaroslavl beat the Pardokova team 1-0. In the East, Salavat Yulaev defeated Stroitzel 8-0, 4 goals for Denisov. And today with the games in Moscow and Volgograd, another round of the handball championships of Russia ended for men. Leaders are the army team in the principal battle with the Krasnodarsky, which is behind it, held a confident victory with a score 29-22. The most results were achieved by Karpishin on the Moscow team with 11 scores. The army currently has 50 points, 1 point less for the Volgograd Kaustik. Good evening. As always at this time, information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. Tomorrow, the weather from the transpolar Murmansk to the shores of the southern seas will be defined by a broad area of low pressure with several centers. One of those centers will be situated over the Kola Peninsula and will bring cloudy weather with light snow in the Murmansk area, Arkhangelsk district, and in Karelia. Temperatures from -6 to -11. In the Nenets Autonomous District and in the Republic of Komi, it's colder, between 10 to 15 below zero, in places from -20 to 25 with some brief snow. On the Arctic coast, blizzards and gusty winds. Here is the influence of an area of higher pressure affecting it, and in the Volgograd area also some brief periods of snow with temperatures of -7 to 12. In the northwestern region and in the Baltic countries there will be fewer clouds, but still some light snow will pass through with rain during the day, -2 to +3. The same weather will be experienced in Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova. Temperatures from 0 to -5. In Moldova, from 0 to +5. The cyclone and atmospheric fronts, which are shifting from Belarus to the east, will bring into the central and central Chernozem areas and to the lower Don cloudy weather with snow. Temperatures from -1 to -6 on the lower Don, around 0. Inclement weather connected with that same cyclone will spread to the northern Caucasus, the lower and central Volga area. During the day, 0 +5 on the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar Rim area, +3 to 8 degrees. On the central Volga, it's cold, -5 to 10. Beyond the Caucasus, partly cloudy skies. In Armenia and in the mountainous parts of Georgia, there will be isolated periods of snow. Day temperatures +4 to 9. In Armenia, -3 to 8. And about the weather in St. Petersburg and Moscow. In St. Petersburg, partly cloudy skies with some light snow. At night, -5 to 7. During the day, -3 to 5. Muscovites can expect cloudy weather with some light snow. Temperatures at night, -10 to 12. During the day, -7 to -9. In the next few days, forecasters expect it will get colder. That completes our broadcast. Goodbye.